Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be talking about the wonderful second season of Freeform's Cruel Summer. We are joined today by cast members Sadie Stanley, Lexi Underwood, and Griffin Gluck. And Sadie, starting with you, I was interested in how you found the different sides of your character in terms of who she is to different people in her life. Also, hi.
Double.
We love it.
Sorry, you said the different sides to Megan.
Yeah, because, like the relationship that she has with her mom is very different to the friendship that she develops with Isabella. And even that goes through so many different stages. And then obviously with Luke, it's very different because they have such history together. So I was interested in how you really developed the different aspects of her that come to the foreground depending on each of these relationships in her life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Megan has such stark differences in her relationships in each timeline. I'm so sorry. Um, which is really fun to play. It's a lot to keep up with, honestly, like because everything changes so drastically every timeline. Yeah, I think that with her relationship with her mom is pretty steady, although like with everything that happens is puts a strain on it for sure. But she grew up with a single mom. She had to grow up really fast. So she's got this very like mature attitude, and very like she's like such a young adult at like 17 years old. And then her relationship with Isabella is obviously up and down throughout the whole thing. We see them get close in the second timeline, and that's really great. And then they're back to being strangers again, basically in that third timeline, but with so much history there. And then her and Luke, have so much history there too. They're best friends. They basically grew up in diapers together, and somehow that changes in the second timeline, and they start to see each other a little differently, which is beautiful and very cute. But yeah, it's really fun. I mean, Megan goes through a lot of changes internally and externally. So it was a lot to juggle, but it was really fun and stretched me as an actor for sure.
I love that. And Lexi, for you in playing Isabella, she comes across as someone who's incredibly confident and has a lot of charisma when she first comes into town. And she kind of knows how to assimilate herself into people's worlds because she's moved around so much and had to do it so often. But I feel like as the season progresses and as she becomes much more comfortable and develops real friendships, that we start to see some of the cracks in terms of what that projection is covering, whether it's things from her past that she doesn't want people to know about, or it's certain insecurities, and even just the insecurity of developing new friendships where she hasn't really had close female friendships in her past. And so how did you want to create the idea of everything that she's projecting and then find where those cracks start to come into play and when we start to get to see what's really underneath for her?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like so when you first meet Isabella, you're right. She's confident, she's charming, she's alluring. But just like the mystery in the show, I think that another big mystery is just who she is deep down inside. I think that when we first meet her herself, she doesn't even truly know because she spent so much time masking and putting up these facades for other people to like her, for external validation. I think that a lot of that also stems from childhood trauma. There's a really beautiful moment in episode 3 where Isabella shares with Megan a little bit about her childhood and her past and her relationship with her parents. And I think that that is a phenomenal scene to be able to, for both girls to be able to understand why they are the way that they are when we first meet them. As it all unfolds, I think that Isabella just naturally unravels. I think that both the friendship for Isabella and Megan is something that's so beautiful because it brings out something that both of them did not know that they had in them prior to meeting each other. And so for Isabella, that fear to not necessarily have yourself done up 24/7, to not always have to be on a level 10 or always smiling or joking, to be able to just be free, to let loose, to be vulnerable, to be a human being, an actual just human being. I think that that's the first time where Isabella's been able to have that space and to also be given that grace to mess up and to make mistakes. And so it's really beautiful to be able to see it all unfold. I think that for me as an actor, it was something that I found with, period of time. We didn't get all the episodes at once. And just like a human being is finding themselves in their day-to-day life, I feel like it was that kind of journey for me as well. So it all unfolded naturally. I learned more about Isabella the more and more that I played her. And a lot of incredible things that, I would have to say, Elle Triedman wrote into it that really helped me get a better understanding of who she may have been before Chatham that made her who she was when she left.
I love that. And Griffin, for you in playing Luke, it feels like he's also at a real crossroads, because there's this idea of who his dad wants him to be, and the image that he feels like he's not living up to in his life, in a way that he kind of looks at his brother being able to do very easily. And it feels like as the series progresses, we really kind of see him coming into his own and kind of finding his own voice a little bit more and what he wants. And so how did you want to create that internal dialogue in the character, where he's at such a crossroads, because it's such a pivotal age in terms of just figuring out who he is against the expectations of his parent?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'm not sure I know the answer. I don't know if I really ever thought about that when I took on the role of Luke. It was in the back of my mind, but I really was just interested to see how that played out. I mean, when like Lexi said, we didn't really get all of the information at once. So when I first got the breakdown for the role, it mentioned he has a difficult relationship with his family, with his dad, with his brother, kind of feels like the outsider in his family. So I went into it just, ready for that in any given scene. And there were a lot of scenes where that was just the only note that I needed to play along with. Paul is such a great scene partner. Worked with him like a decade ago, which makes me feel like an older person than I am. But I worked with him like a decade ago, and that chemistry was still there. He played my dad in a show called Private Practice. So it was kind of like putting on an old glove, or whatever that expression is. It just fit, the scenes, the chemistry was really easy to play off of. I would, kind of follow his lead on a lot of those scenes, and see what he was going to bring towards it. And he just brought such a great, like, natural, angry dad energy to it, that it was really easy to play off of those things. So there wasn't a lot of thinking that had to go into it, because just the chemistry was there. And then with Braden as well, great scene partner. Him and I would take a long time before a scene to really talk about like how we wanted it to come across. We knew that we weren't, friends in the show. We knew we weren't close. We knew we were constantly butting heads. I have an older sibling who I am thankfully close with, but I definitely do understand the dynamic of like older sibling, younger sibling when it comes to parents. Like the older sibling, in my opinion, gets away with a lot more. And it seems really unfair, especially when you're growing up. So that was also, something that was easy and fun to play with. Braden and I would just talk about it before heading into a scene, and I think it all played out pretty well. Fingers crossed. We'll see what everyone else thinks, I guess. I'm happy with it though.
Yeah, no, it's such a great performance and dynamic in that relationship. And there was something that you were mentioning before, Sadie, in terms of your character kind of having to be very adult, and she's very much also a breadwinner for her family, and trying to not just financially prepare herself for college, but to take care of her younger sister and to help financially take care of their home. And it feels like that's one of the parallels that really bring Megan and Isabella together as friends. They both had to kind of be a grown-up before they are grown-ups. And so for the two of you, Lexi and Sadie, I was just interested in how you kind of found a lot of parallels like that, where these two girls have had such different experiences in terms of their upbringing, but aspects like that kind of necessary maturity that they have to go into the world with really connect them and bring them together.
Yeah, I think that is the one thing that really brings them together, although there is still some differences. They had to grow up in different ways. Megan had to grow up in a way that was like, I need to get a job and I need to work, and I know I know the value of money, and I know what that means and what that looks like. And I know what's on the line. And she had to kind of like parent her little sister a little bit. And yeah, there was just like that level of maturity. And then Isabella comes in with a level of maturity that comes with like life experience. I think, she's traveled the world a lot, and she's had all these like crazy stories and crazy experiences, and she's kissed boys and she's drank alcohol, and it's like that's the difference. They're mature in different ways. I mean, oh my God, sorry.
My old roommate.
Also mature in the way that like, she had to be kind of independent from her parents and like fend for herself a little bit, but not financially. But yeah, I think that does bring them together for sure.
And
Yeah.
for you, Lexi?
Yeah, definitely agree with what Sadie said. The mere fact that they were forced to grow up kind of fast. They're both very mature in very different ways, but I think that also when you are, something that I really love about this season is the difference between the the friendships. The two girls in the first season, they were two worlds apart, and in this season the girls are together 24/7. I think that also a lot of the things that they go through over the span of 10 episodes, it's hard not to bond and to be close with someone when you've been through those sort of things. Even in episode one and two, when we find out, about the tape, all those things, the fact that they've had to essentially go through those challenges together and fix their problems together, that's been a big way that in which they bond. But there are a lot of differences between them, which is interesting why they are so close, but it makes for, a really cool and fun dynamic to be able to watch play out.
So it's a trap.
Yeah.
And Sadie and Griffin, in terms of the dynamic between Luke and Megan, like was brought up earlier, they've known each other since they were kids. They've literally been in each other's lives. They not only are close friends, but they know each other's families incredibly well. And then as we get to kind of start to see the romance develop between them and their feelings change a little bit, it's kind of really beautiful to watch, like that initial uncertainty of like, we've always known how to act around one another, and we've had this immense closeness, and even just the body language that they have with each other is very comfortable. And then it kind of goes into this place of uncertainty as they kind of navigate a new space with one another. And so how did the two of you kind of work to find, okay, what's going to feel really foreign and different to them? And then how are they going to find that way back to that different level of comfort in a more romantic way with each other?
Wow.
Great.
These are all really good questions.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared. Sadie, I know what I think, but what do you think? No, you go.
I think that, me and Griffin both just wanted it to feel like just super real and like awkward and natural. Like there's a lot of like sweet moments between them that are like a little bit awkward. I mean, these are kids, especially Megan. Like she doesn't have a lot of experience with boys. This is new to her. And so we wanted it just to feel like kind of like juvenile and sweet. And there's like a moment on the dock where they're like, about to hold each other's hand. And it's like this, you want to feel that tension and that like heartbeat in your chest that's like, oh my God, is this really happening? Or, at his birthday party when they're having like a moment and they can't really explain it, but they can both feel it. So we wanted to like feel subtle and sweet and awkward. And then eventually they kind of get more comfortable and realize that it's actually a pretty easy transition, even though they're seeing a different side of each other.
Yeah, I mean, all I have to add is like I thought it was fun to go on that journey with Luke and Megan because obviously, I mean, I guess, in the early episodes, you see them at one point and the other, and we knew how to make that feel different because it was, far enough apart that it was like, okay, well, here they're more juvenile, like Sadie said, and here they're a little bit like they've got an extra layer added to it. But what was most interesting for me was like the later episodes, like especially around episode 7, where she's talking about where you kind of see how it happens. And you see how they get closer. And it's a really nice, solid middle ground that kind of explains both of the different energies. So that was a lot of fun. I mean, for me personally.
Yeah.
And Lexi, in terms of Isabella, it feels like she's someone who has a lot of conviction behind her actions and doesn't really kind of stop to question the choices that she's made. She makes very like considered, intelligent choices and really stands by them. So even the moment where she's like, it was me on the tape, that's what we're going to tell people. There's not moments of her going, should I have done this? She's like, I absolutely stand by it. You would have done the same thing for me. And so did you find her to be someone who is like very decisive and very much on the surface in terms of the choices and actions that she makes throughout the series?
Yeah, I honestly think that a lot of her decisions are very impulsive. And I think that the way in which she decides to stick to them is really interesting, especially when it's very evident that the choices that she's making is very damaging to her character and her future. But I think that yet again, it stems from trauma. It stems from a lot of things. I just don't feel as though she received that sort of validation from her parents or from her loved ones. So she feels as though she has to go to the most extreme lengths with her decision making and able to prove to those around her that she will do anything for them and that she's loyal. I think that it's really interesting how she decides to stick to them, but for some reason, she just doesn't back down. She knows what she wants. And when she's made it up in her mind, she does not stop until she gets there. It's really interesting to watch. It's a bit chaotic. She's kind of like a ticking bomb and just very, Very little time before she explodes.
And Sadie, when we first meet Megan at the beginning of the series, she's got so many ambitions and such a specific idea of her future and how she's going to build towards that and all of the steps that she needs to go through. But I think there's something really interesting in watching a character kind of learn to embrace her imperfections and to allow for imperfect moments in her life through the presence of this friendship. And so what was that journey for you in taking a character who's really just trying to hold everything so tightly and then kind of finds different ways to let loose a little bit?
Absolutely. You're right on it. I think that because of Megan's upbringing, she feels like she can't mess up. She feels like she has to make the right decision always. She has to be responsible always. She has to do what's best for the people around her always, even at the expense of herself. And it's less about validation like it is with Isabella, and it's more just like it feels like that's her job. You know, it feels like she's not allowed to be a kid. She's not allowed to, make a mistake or make a selfish choice or a questionable choice. And I think it's funny that you brought that up, because I think really like her going through that experience like affected me in my personal life too. I think that I really relate to Megan in that way. Like it's hard for anybody to accept that they're not perfect, and it's hard for anybody to accept that they make mistakes. But that's such a human thing, and such a it comes with growing up. That's how it goes. And I think it's really beautiful when she decides that it's okay for her to relax a little bit and be a kid. It's like it's just a deep breath and a release, and it's great for her. So
absolutely. And Griffin, Luke feels like someone who's so on the surface in terms of his honesty. He's very open with his emotions, with his feelings. And it feels like he's never trying to kind of hide behind himself and be someone different for the world. And so did you find him to be someone who's kind of very honest and very open with his feelings, and also then equally someone who kind of always assumes the best in other people and assumes that everybody else is being straightforward and upfront when he first meets them, because that's how he is?
Yeah, I think I definitely tried to bring some of that to Luke. I feel like that's how I am as a person. Definitely. I try and be like just honest and upfront with how I feel, and I expect the same from others. But I think the fun part for me was like I see a lot of myself in Luke, especially growing up. Maybe sometimes not in all the best ways, because there is the downside of that, where I feel like he is a bit of a people pleaser as well. He's not going to go out of his way to lie to you. I mean, unless he really feels that it's like the right thing to do, which a lot of times it's just not. It's just the easy way out. But the interesting thing to me about Luke is his youth and how young and in some ways naive he is. And also how he's doing what he thinks is best at all times. But that doesn't necessarily equate to like it being the best thing to do at all times. He's young, he's stupid, he's making mistakes, and he's trying to learn from them. But I think his issue is he's a little hesitant to learn. He thinks I think in a way he thinks he's better than his dad and his brother in that way, because he's not manipulative and he's not this, that, and the other. But he's still a very flawed person, and I think sometimes that's harder for him to see, because of his youth and his naivety.
And for all three of you, I wanted to just ask about the process of kind of navigating a lot of the complexities and telling a story that's taking place during these three different timelines throughout the series. Because as was mentioned earlier as well, you also didn't have all of the scripts up front at the beginning, and there's so many details that come out about each character and so much development episode by episode. And then you're also kind of thinking very specifically about, well, what just happened right before in this particular timeline? And I know that you were shooting all three different timelines kind of conjunctively as well. And so how did you all kind of like find what was the best approach for you in terms of just tracking and really figuring out the emotional arc of your character and where they were at every moment throughout with all of that?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for the girls, but I know for me what it was because this was a challenge. This was really not easy, but was because of the complexities of it all and how often things would change in the scripts and how we didn't know what was going to happen next, and we didn't really know what would inform that scene or what that scene would be informing. There would be a million different ways to play it. So at least for me, what I ended up feeling like I had to settle on was just figuring out who I thought my character was, even if I don't know everything, just like at their core, at their center, like who that person might be, and just treating each and every scene as, don't think about the context of what it informs, don't think about what's informing this, just try to be the character in the scene at that moment. How would they feel in this scene, in this scenario? How would they feel in this scenario? And just try and forget about everything else, because the writing is going to do it for you. If the performance is off, people will tell you, they'll give you a little bit more motivation. Maybe they'll give you some like kernels of information that you might need to know for your character at that moment. But it was definitely just, it was a very difficult thing to navigate, but for me, the easiest thing was to kind of like throw my hands up and be like, okay, I have no control over that. I'm not going to be able to know. So what's the best way to operate in that scenario? And that was just like, trying to exist. This sounds so corny actor stuff, but trying to exist like truthfully in each and every scene, just as that scene is, without worrying about all these different timelines and everything. At least that's how I had to approach things. But again, I don't know about the gals.
Yeah. No, I think that, I think that's definitely true for me too, in some ways. Like, I think I just learned that I am Megan's biggest advocate. I am in charge of Megan, and I know her, and I know how she would act and how she would feel in certain scenes. And then also we had great executive producers and the showrunner who were there to answer our questions, which sometimes they didn't even know the answer to yet. So that was like, it was a weird experience. I've never, worked in that kind of like condition before, but it was honestly a little bit freeing once you got used to it. It was like, okay, I do not know everything. I do not have control of everything. I am just going to do what I think is best, and I'm going to take the direction of the amazing director and this showrunner, and I'm just going to trust. And I've never had to put so much trust in like people before, and the editing before, but yeah, it was good. And then also, it is in the script. Like you can keep track of it if you put in the work and you write out the timelines, and you go back to the old scripts and you figure out, what does my character know at this point? What just happened right before the scene? You can do that. And that is helpful in certain scenes for sure. But yeah, it is just about existing as your character, definitely.
Yep. Piggybacking off of what the two of them said, it's our job as actors to like know our character like the back of our hand. You want to feel so comfortable with your character to the point where you're able to adjust in any scenario that's thrown at you, especially in this case when it's such a will they, won't they, what's going to happen next, who done it type of thing. So you do definitely just have to trust the team and trust yourself and your instincts as an artist. I also think that it's really awesome of the fact that we were able to essentially use hair and makeup and also things like music as tools to be able to put us in those spaces where our characters are emotionally. It definitely makes a difference if you are at the top of the day and you have like bright purple eyeshadow and, a mini dress and, heels on, and then at the end of the day you have no makeup and you're in a ponytail with like cargo jeans and just a plain old tee. By looking at yourself in the mirror, you automatically feel a difference. And for me, I made playlists specific to each timeline and what my character was going through during each timeline, because each version of Isabella is very different and she's going through a lot. And so being able to use tools like that helped us stay on track whenever it felt like it was a little too much or a little confusing to be able to keep up with. But the team is phenomenal and we just trusted them the entire time. And I think that hopefully we did a good job and it shows in the end.
Off the back of that, how did costumes, hair, and makeup help you specifically, Sadie? Because it feels so specifically like you have these spaces where she's externally projecting everything that she's feeling on the inside. And especially in that final timeline, having such a drastically different look, how did that help you in terms of tapping into a lot of the internal aspects of her?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Any way that Megan is presenting herself is indicative of what's going on inside. So when we first meet her, she's such a tomboy. She's too afraid to even dress girly. She's too afraid to even like try and put herself out there. So it's overalls, shorts, t-shirts. You know what I mean? Like that's her safe zone, and that's where she feels comfortable. And she's too scared to put herself out there. Obviously, in that second timeline, Isabella kind of has a little influence on her, and she's like, okay, maybe I can be a little girly, maybe I can put on a little skirt, maybe I can, like show my stomach a little bit, like maybe I do want to, tap into that. And then of course in that last timeline, that is it's a mask. It's a this hard exterior is to protect herself from society and everybody who's keeps staring at her and keeps looking at her, and it's just to kind of protect herself in a way. And it's a coping mechanism, I think, because if she looks tough on the outside, then maybe she can have some of that on the inside too, to be able to like get her through the day. But yeah, it definitely helps, those different looks. I feel like I sit differently, my energy is different in that third timeline, like just like it gets into your body, and that's like really important for me too, is that like I'm not just in my head, like I know what's going on, but in my body I feel different, and in my body I feel like emotionally there. So yeah, it was great. It was really fun. I've never looked like that before as far as the third timeline goes, so it was cool.
And then lastly, for you, Lexi and Sadie, what's really beautiful in watching the development of the friendship between these two girls is just, it feels like they each have someone who really sees them for the first time and kind of really looks beneath the surface for them, and also really elevates and lifts them up and kind of is like, these are your attributes that are really great, celebrate yourself, be yourself. And so for each of you, what was the impact that had on your individual characters of going through this space and really having someone see them for who they are, and also just embracing all their fallibilities as much as the things that are wonderful about them?
I think that for Isabella specifically, through her relationship with Megan, this is the first time that not only someone else, but also herself has given her the permission and space to just be vulnerable. I feel like, especially because she's always felt as though she has to put on this facade, with parents, friends, I'm sure at boarding school. She's said that she's been all over the place. So you got to think different cultures that she's experienced and the people that she's come across. She may not I don't feel as though she's ever felt like truly accepted, and felt as though she could like let down her walls with somebody and just be herself. And I think that Megan brings that out of her, and it's very beautiful for Isabella, because after 18 years of having to feel and seem like you have everything put together, she's able to finally just let go and say, I'm not okay, which we all know as humans is just an incredibly freeing and healing process as well.
I think Isabella does that for Megan in a way too. Megan and Luke obviously have such a close relationship, so she knows what it's like to have a best friend, of course, and they are very close. But I think that just the difference in having a female friend, I think Katie's character says it in the like first scene of the show. She's like, female friends are different, and I think there's some truth to that. I think that she's never had somebody that like really she could talk about things like that with, that she could talk about these like certain insecurities that she had, or these certain like things that she craved, like she craved to let go, and she craved letting loose and being a bad girl, or I think that Isabella says that she has these yearnings, but I think she was just too afraid to say it, and so Isabella comes in and just gives her the space to, like, I don't know, be a teenage girl. It's very sweet. And, they also talk about the hard stuff too. Yeah.
Well, I'm incredibly excited to see where the rest of the season goes based on everything that you've all built into these characters so far. So congratulations on a great series. And thank you so much for talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Seriously.